Hello and welcome back to Parley. This one was paid for by EyePatchNotes. I hope you'll enjoy listening. Let's see what they have to say. EyePatchNotes wants to talk about Limbus Company's many languages. You said, may I request a short viewing analysis of the Limbus Company now in stores trailer's use of multiple languages. Given the disturbing graphics and themes, I included their lengthy content warning below. The parlay should be doable with only the trailer and the context below. I can also walk it back. If there's time and it doesn't distract from the parlay's narrative, I'd be curious for the captain's thoughts on the content warning itself. Now we'll pause here. There's more to the request, obviously. I'm not going to show the trailer in the parlay. I've linked it in the description. You should go watch it. We are going to talk about the content warning for a minute so that you can decide if you want to go watch it. I think that there are three problems with showing the trailer. One, I'm not sure it's entirely necessary for this topic, but that's specific to this topic. Two, I'm a little bit concerned about reproducing it like without any alterations for fair content use, or the video getting monetized by the rights holder, or just YouTube flagging the video as being graphic, which it is, and then that affects this channel. It's probably fine, but I generally don't include like full blocks of video, and I would rather continue not to do that. So I'm not going to do that. Again, reason number three. I also think in some ways it's better for you in that the parlay's runtime isn't taken up by the trailer, but it's not very long. It's only 2.5 minutes. So we will talk about that content warning. And then, yeah, you should then go watch it. I'll pause and you can go watch it. It's like 2.5 minutes. I'll give you a little, your teacher in class giving you a little prompt for what to look for when you watch it. How about that? And then after you come back from watching it, you can unpause this video and we'll keep going. I just think that's the easiest way to do it. It's almost exactly the same as if I put it in, so I hope that's okay. The content warning, it almost perfectly fits my aspect ratio. Here it is. Now, I would agree that this is some contents. Let's put it there small for just a sec. My content warning for it is that, yeah, I think like if you've seen gory game trailers, I don't really feel like this is anything that we didn't invent a new level of gore, you know. But there's a lot. Now, content warnings, I think, can be really good when they allow people who would we can reasonably guess that people might be vulnerable to these topics, and they can try to engage them more carefully or choose to avoid them if they feel they need to. That's great, and they take like 1 second. People who don't like content warnings usually just have a really frustrating objection, or they feel like it's babying people or something, or people should just kind of get over it. And look, man, like if you want people to get over things, you have to help them get over things. They need an environment where they can get over stuff. People can't just magically change how they feel about stuff. They might need some help. Why can't we, within reason, just give them a hand by flagging those things? When it is reasonable to assume that somebody might be upset by something, it's a vulnerable topic, the people who made it know that those things are upsetting, you know? So why not just say? I do have a minor concern since we're here, and maybe I'll talk about this more later, but since you asked for some thoughts about it, I do have a minor concern that this is kind of too many. Warning people about a lot of things is good, but some of these things, I just feel like I guess it's hard to say this, right? But it's difficult to define which ones are more important. So for example, flashing lights, photosensitivity. This trailer definitely has a content warning for epilepsy. I feel that's kind of more important than just drug use. Now, there might be people for whom drug use would be a thing that would deeply upset them, and they want to be prepared for that. I'm not saying that necessarily shouldn't be on there, but you can see how by having so many, it might make it a bit more difficult for people to parse. Like they won't read through the whole list. Maybe this is unfair to people who would use a content warning. They will take the time to read through them all. I don't know. There's a reason we don't often see this many. I feel like a lot of these things are sort of assumed of that genre. And I do feel at that point that the benefit might be so small on clarifying that, like, yeah, this thing that has lots of violence and strong language and stuff, like, may also have drug use. I feel like that might be obvious enough that it isn't worth distracting from the other ones that might be less obvious, just because I feel like it's giving the people that would be sensitive to that content more credit They probably know that that's a risky area or subject matter. I don't know. Maybe it's better to do it this way. By the way, I don't know. I mean, I honestly don't really care if it's better for the people that are concerned about those topics. Then we should do it that way. I think the way they want it, that's the best way to do it. Sure. But it made me think, why don't I often see them like this? Why do I usually not see them made this way? Is there something better about doing it one way or the other? And that made me think, I'm not sure this many is ideal in every way. I'm curious what people think about that, but I want to be clear that it has nothing to do with me not wanting the best for anyone who is sensitive to those subjects. I just wonder if that is the best way to do it. I'm not sure. But yeah, interesting. I might have more to say about that in the future. I think it's great that they distinguish that. And I also think it's worth considering that this game does come from a culture whose content warnings I'm less familiar with, the South Korean culture. So it's possible that there's something I'm missing about that. Maybe that actually is quite normal and I just haven't seen those content warnings. Anyway, anyway. So now I'm going to suggest that you go watch the trailer. It's linked in the description. You go check it out. It's like 2.5 minutes. You're gonna go through it. This is an odd looking game, an odd looking trailer, and a strange looking game. This is a weird game. I've played a little bit of Limbus Company too. Very interesting having seen the trailer first and then played the game. And I had no expectations for this game or anything. I just saw the trailer and then thought, I'll play a little bit of the game, and I'm having a good time so far. I don't want to recommend the game. That's not what we're doing here. But go watch the trailer. What I want you to look for is basically the use of multiple languages, yes, but also the main cast of characters. What you're doing basically is taking your ragtag gang of hooligans, the 12 sinners, riding around on your Magi technology bus, and the clockhead figure that you'll see is you, the main character. Dante is your name, and you have an ability that makes you a valuable manager for the sinners. Let's just leave it at that. And they're all very meaningfully violent people. Let's say it that way. Let's maybe leave it at that. And you're going to lead them in doing various dirty jobs, kind of pillaging the ruined corpses of a bunch of other big technology corporations. And one of the things you're looking for is going to be one of the subjects of this parlay. You'll see it toward the end. It's the Golden Bow. The Golden Bow is a mysterious plot MacGuffin, sort of a not entirely clear plot detail that I will show you with the one content warning that you probably don't need for this. Here it is. You're going to see this guy. And you can see that the Golden Bow has surrounding it a bunch of different languages. The words the Golden Bow, presumably in a ton of different languages globally. Now, like real languages, Chinese, Korean, Japanese, Arabic, etc. I said all the ones I would, Sanskrit, Hebrew, Spanish, French, surely, German, etc. Tons of languages, right? And we're going to talk about that. But you may notice throughout the trailer other like multicultural things, I guess you might say. So think about that. Think about this going in. This is toward the end of the trailer. I just want you to think about it before the trailer, okay? So now we're going to pause here. You go watch the trailer. I'm going to just like time stop. Hey, boy. All right. I hope it was good. I hope you had a good time. I hope it was interesting. We're now going to read the rest of the parlay. Returning to lyrical narrative. Mealy is a Japanese music group performing the English opening for this Korean game. EyePatchNotes continues. To set the mood, it begins with a nod to the Italian Dante's Inferno. All hope abandon ye who enter here is the Latin that it says at the very beginning. Continuing the story of both Lobotomy Corporation and Library of Ruina, the developers' two previous games, I would like to draw attention to the MacGuffins, plot devices, used in Limbus Company, the branches of the Tree of Light. The Tree of Light was essentially a mass of pure energy and dispersed throughout the dystopian setting. Monsters and the criminal populace roam the streets. Daily life is in no way comfortable. Putting aside specific story beats, anyone who wants to improve their lot in life should seek to claim a golden bow, by means of extreme violence and reappropriation, of course. There's a spoiler, but EyePatchNotes says, from a storyboarding sense, I think framing the Golden Bow in myriad languages is clever. I'll talk about it a little bit more. And in Hell We Live Lament, the trailer soundtrack handily sets the stage for what kind of story Limbus Company will tell. Both the audio and visuals refer heavily to sin and hell. The playable characters, sinners, and mechanics also directly embody the seven deadly sins, almost to the point of parody. Basically, we're meant to talk about what's going on. Yes, I particularly I'm not sure I'm prepared to talk about this, but the game mechanics being set the seven deadly sins, but then one of them is changed a little bit, was also really interesting to me too. Greed, it's greed, I believe, is changed to gloom. So I guess greed isn't a sin in this world, or there's some commentary on that. That again, I'm not sure I've played enough of this game to fully comment on, but I noticed that six of them are normal, and then the seventh is gloom instead of greed. Anyway, yeah. What's up with the multiple languages? I don't know. In the game, there's a little an early line where a character comments on someone speaking in English versus Korean. So doing that to me says, we might see all these languages, but are we in Korea? Is this South Korea? People are diegetically speaking Korean. It's not that the game is in Korean. It's that we're hearing the voices they're really using in universe. They're in the world of the story. They're diegetically speaking in Korean. Maybe. And so when someone says something in English as like a borrowed word from a different language, the way we might say like raison d'être, like a reason for existing, but that's French, and we're saying it it's reasonably common to say that in English. Is that what they're doing? And they are speaking Korean, but then occasionally they speak English, and those languages are literally Korean and English. You see what I mean? Other characters have abilities that are in different languages too. There's stuff in Spanish or Italian or etc. Characters' abilities might be in those languages, for example. The cast as well. I told you to focus a little bit on the cast. It's a fairly wide spread. They're pretty white, to be fair, but it's a reasonably wide spread of types of people. Particularly something that caught my eye. This might be kind of weird. Is a lot of games don't have very different heights of men. That was something that caught my eye about this game. They might just be different ages, maybe. But Sinclair, he's toward the end and he's blonde, kind of short. He might just be young. Maybe he's just young. But I don't know. It made me think there is a range of heights in the game, or like Yisung and Faust, Sinners 1 and 2, who we won't bother pointing out. But anyway, Yisung is male, and I feel like speaks as if he is about Faust's equal, at least on mental intelligence, and he's shorter, which is not like guys are often shorter than girls. But you know what I mean? Like that isn't the most commonly depicted in mass media. Where it would be common for people to be of very different heights, including men, would be multiculturally. People are different heights in different parts of the world, right? So that was the thing that I thought of. And the sinners come from very different walks of life. That's a big point in the game. They are not like all from the same circumstances at all. They might be familiar with this world. They might have that common ground. But Gregor, for example, you might have noticed one of them has an insect arm, kind of like a claw. Gregor has a very, very different. He was, to avoid many spoilers, he was kind of used as a mascot or a poster child for an insect modification group. That is a very different background than some of the other sinners have. They, from a lifestyle perspective, might as well not be able to relate at all. So I guess my first big point is that I think that evoking the many different languages is meant to not be too literal, maybe. It's maybe more meant to mean the many different walks of life and different origin points and different ways of getting to the root of the thing. I do also think that Limbus Company has a pretty strong focus on how the different corporations, while they might have different methods in general, the kind of the core sins that they were committing are not really different. even if the situation in the Lobotomy Corporation was different from the one in Limbus Company. Lobotomy Corporation has fallen during the gameplay of Limbus Company, and you go there. People from Lobotomy Corporation talk about how like it was really bad for them in a similar way to how it was for other corporations. Even though the details differed, not everybody has an insect arm or whatever. Not everybody was training abominations to generate infinite power or whatever. The, ultimately, the sort of bad things being done were the same. They sort of all come back to the same root. There's many different ways to translate those things that are being done badly, but ultimately they've kind of all suffered the same fate. So you could look at the different languages that the word the golden bow is set in as being a way to represent the universal nature of this power, but also this society and the bad things that are happening in it. I think that making the song for the game be in multiple languages and then adding even more is again maybe meant to add to the feeling that this is more universal than just any set thing. I'm imagining that the golden bow, once we find it, this is not a spoiler. I don't know, by the way. In my part, where I am in the game, we're still going down there. I would imagine that this is in the category of an omnipotent wish granter. It doesn't do one specific thing. I doubt. It's either going to be down to earth, like it's just a power source, period, or it's going to be more abstract, like basically the Holy Grail. This part reminds me a lot of the Fate franchise, if you're familiar with that. Fate Grand Order, but also Fate Stay Night, Fate Zero. These are games that heavily feature Holy Grails, which are basically just masses of magical energy. Why they take the shape of a cup, don't make me explain that. But that would be my first answer, is that I think broadly, the reason for the multiple languages is to evoke the universal themes that the game is trying to tackle. It's not meant to be that you too specifically focus on like, oh, they did this one thing wrong, they did that thing wrong. Everybody has been wronged in a more base sense. There is something more fundamentally broken about this society than these specific things. And just because Gregor has an insect arm and other characters don't, doesn't mean that they weren't wronged in the same way. I suspect the reason that the game tackles Gregor earlier on is because it's more obvious. Like they're probably, I would suspect, going to introduce that point over time. So, and I would say that from the trailer, I noticed that. I thought, like, why does only that one guy? I didn't know this person yet. Why does only that one guy have that different appendage? They all seem to be treated as like equally bad, even though a lot of them don't look that bad. I feel like there is a, maybe getting into point two, this introduces the theme that we're not meant to focus too much on outward appearance. Heathcliff is one of the main cast, and he has this huge bat that says revenge on it. The edgelordiest boy of all time. He's a big buff dude with a huge bat that says revenge on it. And he looks mad, and he's mad at everyone, and he's Heathcliff. And there are other members of the group that aren't, that don't act like that. But they all slaughter things in combat just the same. It's not like Heathcliff he is great, but it's not that he's way better than the other units, in combat. And neither are they depicted as being at all unequal. They all have a similar, you know, as if they've horribly wronged the world, blood painted over their pictures during the trailer. That part is relatively universal. The way that it's different for each of them was interesting. You'll notice that for each of the little images of the main characters, we see that the blood gets splattered over them in different ways, but it's meant to evoke something more general. That feels connected to me to putting multiple languages in. Maybe to say it like this: the type of artistic vision that wanted to represent these themes with many, many languages, it would also make sense to that kind of person to do different blood splatters, but they all did the same sort of core thing wrong. They all committed a sin. They're even all called sinners. They have different orientations, like what kind of sin they committed, sure, but ultimately they all messed up. So, so for point two, yeah, I do think it's also to do with the specific characters. We're not necessarily meant to understand that they're all so nationally diverse. It kind of looks like we're in a pretty central location, like one big city, and that all these people are more or less from that city, I guess. That they show at the end, we see all the districts and stuff, but that they have a great diversity of, you know, walks of life. Nevertheless, I mean, it could be a very global city. I don't know. Um, let's see. What else can we do? The parody thing. Hmm. Yes, I think that the elephant in the room for this trailer is it's like really don't cut yourself on that edge, you know? But it knows that. Like I believe this trailer is quite aware of that. And having played the game, I think that it's told with a maturity that suggests that the person writing it knows that that could come across as a bit, you know, don't cut yourself on that edge. That's pretty sharp. You know, it's an edgy boy trailer. Um, that could be dangerous. You know, don't run with knives. That definitely is a feeling the trailer has, and yet I would argue that the narrative told is relatively more restrained than you would expect. If you play this game, you may be expecting something a little immature. That could be a criticism I would imagine for this game, and you'll probably be surprised. I didn't overall think it was very inexperiencedly written. I don't really know how to say. There's a good amount of restraint, I think, in the storytelling that you wouldn't really expect from this trailer. That's a very trailer thing to do, by the way. That the trailer shows the game to be more schlocky than it actually is. Another thing, though, that you might expect from the trailer is that it's going to be really actiony, and actually, in my opinion, a lot less bleak than it is. That's another detail to me that I'm not really sure what to say about. But yeah, a big thing that comes to mind is that a lot of people might view this and think, you know, is this really dealing with any underlying themes? There's something edgy as well. We could do a whole parlay on like what is it, what even is edgy? But there's something inherently kind of edgy about using words borrowed from other languages. EyePatchNotes has a great bit about this. You said author's notes, not for direct discussion per se. Oh, but it's a really good fit in this discussion. I'm glad you included this. Japanese culture has the term chunibyo or high schooler syndrome to describe middle schooler syndrome. Well, anyway, to describe the sprinkling of gratuitous English over non Japanese verbiage in an attempt to sound cool. We also have the inverse and derogatory weeaboo here in America to describe an English, usually speaker, sprinkling in gratuitous Japanese. For that example, you might hear something like people will say like "nani the hell." Nani means like is like a what explanation in Japanese, and they'll sprinkle in things like that. Or they'll say like everything's all daijobu, like okay, daijobu is it's fine basically. That's not quite how you'd say those things in Japanese, but that's sort of the point. And it's very common to hear, you know, people will say like, I don't know enough Japanese to easily produce some chuni sounding phrase, but this can be great fun in moderation, and then it will get old very fast. So yeah, anyway, that is absolutely something that I might have expected. I might have answered this parlay by saying this is literally just some chuny level. They're saying, you know, the golden tree as a way to, you know, sound really cool, when in fact that sounds ridiculous. But having played the game a little bit more, I really don't think so. I don't know. But that is definitely like point 2.5 is uh like maybe they're just, you know, having a bit of a language thing. Um, is it bad fetishizing language like that? I don't know. Anyway, um, I don't think that this game is very guilty of that, but I do think that that's a very reasonable reading of this frame of the trailer after you've seen the trailer, getting to this part and going, "Oh, here we go," you know. But then having played the game, I personally didn't. I thought, "Oh wow, I'm pleasantly surprised. It doesn't really do that." Um, I would like to add 2.75 while we're here, actually, which is kind of a YouTube thumbnail thing. This is a trailer and heavily trafficked on YouTube. And a big thing in YouTube thumbnails or YouTube culture in general is putting something in that doesn't really make any sense, just as a way to sort of like, don't you wonder how this works? Like, don't you want to know what this means? Why is it in so many languages when like there's maybe not a literal reason, you know? The reason is more abstract. So I do also think that that's a marketing person having suggested this knows what they're doing, and we can't really analyze any meaning out of it that way. But it's pretty uncommon for stuff like this for it to be only one thing. You know, it's probably all four of the things that I've said so far, including the Chunibyo thing a little bit. The marketing person said put a ton of languages on there, and then the creative people working on the project said that could connect to the like universal nature of sin, which sure, by the way, like there's no harm no foul here at Limbus Company. Yeah, I guess like that works. So cool. Let's reveal the spoiler that EyePatchNotes included. They say, from a storyboarding sense, I think framing the Golden Bow in myriad languages is clever. In universe, the allure of a life-changing artifact defies language and culture. The world is cruel, and thus any means to power is justified. The meta use of multiple languages also carries a sense of depth and inclusion to me. Weaving words of different cultures together is complex by nature, and thus I tend to remember and appreciate performances that are in non-native English. Interesting. Suggesting that there's a kind of flip side to the edgy high schooler syndrome thing with the multiple languages, that actually genuinely employing multiple languages requires quite a lot of experience, and so that should be seen as a sign of a venerable nature from the creatives, including the Latin quote at the beginning does mean you need to have like read the Latin quote or the Italian. I mean, okay, but anyway, the Latin quote from Dante's Inferno, the Italian quote. You can't put the Latin, the Italian, oh my goodness, for all hope abandon ye who enter here, if you don't know the Italian for blankety blank and understand its significance. You might say it feels a little throwaway, but it does mean that the people who wrote the story have read some of Dante's Inferno. And indeed, we do. Your main character is called Dante, and the first chapter is called Inferno, and we do basically begin descending through circles of hell thematically. So that is a thing that the story is doing. I'm not sure. I, an actual English major, which I'm not saying is a good thing, would praise this so highly, but I'm saying that as a derogatory term for myself. I think the reason I'm so critical of this is just because I've been ruined by majoring in English. I think that you being relatively generous toward like, yeah, that's a can be a deep thing to include in a story is totally fair. And I think that I have a somewhat unjustified, not negative reaction, but somewhat guarded reaction to when people put quotes like this in. You know what I can't help but feel for a bit of harsh critique toward this story is that when people do that, I can't help but think to myself, would you do that if the story was just really good? Does it need to reference other things? But you could argue that this is a good form of referencing other things. After all, I would argue that people seeing the Italian, thinking, oh, it's Italian or Latin, according to me, or something, will just kind of think, oh, a Latin quote at the beginning of something, oh, an Italian quote at the beginning of something, a quote at the beginning of something. And that evokes a certain tone for a story, even if it doesn't even mean anything to the audience member. In that sense, it's pretty effective. The most effective references in media, my biggest, I guess, counter argument toward my own view that referencing stuff a ton in media is bad by default. Why not just display it without referencing it? Is that you can reference things in a way where their value still fires to people who do not know the reference. That is absolutely possible, and you could argue that here they more or less accomplished that. Yeah, I'm not sure I have too much else to say. I think this game is kind of cool. I'm not sure I'm really prepared to recommend it. It's not that I don't like it, it's that there's a lot. I don't think the tutorial process is very good, but better games have done that worse. If you want the story, I would say you'll probably like it. Like if that's what you were going to the game for, it definitely is focused on that element. It wants to tell a story. If you want that and you're worried that this lore like won't go anywhere, no, it really does. Like you're fine. You can definitely play that for this. Um, I would imagine if you've played Lobotomy Corporation and Library of Ruina and you want more lore for this world, I would imagine you're probably more or less happy with this game. And maybe even this trailer. There's a comment early on the trailer where somebody breaks down with timestamps, I think, like what some of the stuff in the trailer is. Like the destroyed Lobotomy Corporation is pictured, I guess. And they broke that down a little bit. So that made me think, like, okay, this is a game that is definitely engaging in an ongoing story. But did I, a person who doesn't really know anything about that, feel lost? Not really. No. I did play a little bit of Library of Ruina, and I would say I less than I did of Limbus Company, and I would say that I see some general theme similarities, like the convoluted semi-mystical contract where employees have a very bizarre thing they're kind of roped into, a very complicated Ponzi scheme. Um, that element is similar, but it's a different one, sort of, um, and that we go into the realm of the mind quite a bit. That's another element that feels similar, but otherwise, I would say besides like really specific kind of magic technology, um, they feel fairly different. I don't feel like it's the same thing, a remake of Library of Ruina. And some of the mechanics I didn't like from that game are kind of refreshed here. You didn't ask for a review of the game, but I don't know. I think I'm having a fairly good time. I'm interested in talking about it. So there you go. There's a few minutes about that. I think it's neat. I think the worst thing about the game is its tutorial. It's pretty oblique. I think that they could do a few things that would massively improve the user interface, mostly making it easier to see a character's deck of abilities. It's very small, so maybe you wouldn't call it a deck, but their abilities, their skills, and what their ego, their kind of big abilities cost at a glance. There are some features that let you do that, but I don't think they're that good. And I think it would be a lot better if they were better, because those are, I think, the major strategic points in the game. That I thought that was needlessly unclear, but yeah, otherwise it's cool. If you play it from a gameplay perspective, I think you should be prepared to be a little bit patient. It's not gonna be like too hard or anything, but I didn't really understand for longer than I would have liked, longer than I really needed to be confused, I think. I feel like you could do the tutorial much better by breaking down what happens when characters attack each other. I don't think it's actually that complicated, but because they never really did that, I don't feel. I was confused for a lot longer than is really necessary. You know, each attack has a number value. You flip a certain number of coins that each give a certain bonus to that value based on whether you get heads, and then the person with the higher number does the big damage. That's not exactly how it works, but that's close enough, you know. It really wouldn't have been that difficult to have explained that, which they sort of did, but again, not as clearly as I feel like it could have been. Um, Lots of weird little idiosyncratic mechanics like sanity that I'm still trying to understand. But yeah, the coin flips are apparently affected by that. So if your sanity's lower, then it's not the coin flip isn't 50-50. That's a thing that isn't that clear. I saw people winning a bunch of coin flips and I thought, what? Huh? Like I'm getting very lucky almost all the time. Like, yeah, that's totally a mechanic. Anyway, we won't go into that too much more. Cool. I hope that you enjoyed my little discussion of this. I hope that you thought that format was okay. Again, I didn't decide to show the whole trailer in the parlay. I hope that was all right the way I decided to deal with that. Hope you had a good time. I hope people thought it was interesting. I did. I'm really happy you recommended this and asked for this parlay. I'm having a pretty good time so far.